Recently, I finally sat down and played through a particular mod for Doom that people have been cryptically buzzing about called myhouse.wad, and sure enough, it definitely is one of the most interesting Doom mods out there. It's impressive alone from a technical perspective, with how it makes use of silent teleporters and other modern Jazzy Doom tricks to create the many illusions and scares it presents. But My House was more than just a technical showcase for the Doom engine, as the developer had put considerable effort into the lore and backstory for the mod, going as far as to create a fake story about its development on the Doom World page, that it was found on an old floppy disk in his recently deceased friend's family home, with the Google Drive even containing photos of locations that are in the mod, along with a cryptic developer journal. It's the kind of effort that you don't too often think to associate with a Doom mod, or at least not from my experience anyway, since the amount of Doom mods there are out there is seemingly eternal. Bad jokes aside, this level of commitment to building a mysterious world is very reminiscent of creepypastas that circulate throughout the internet. For those of you who somehow don't know what a creepypasta is, it's essentially an urban legend or horror story that was shared through the internet, and My House even explicitly features a creepypasta in the form of punishment for attempting to noclip, with you being teleported to the backrooms. It was upon this fatal error in judgment on my part that I started thinking about other creepypastas, many of which have become the subject of indie horror games that have more than likely been played by Markiplier at some point. One that came to mind quickly was Slender Man, arguably the most popular out of all of them, at least for a period, before he kind of just started to become annoying. Not that that stopped Hollywood from making a god-awful movie adaptation of the poor Lovecraftian humanoid, about 5 years too late after his popularity died. I then quickly realised that one of my favourite games based upon the Slender mythos had just turned 10 years old, that being Slender the Arrival from Blue Owl Studios and Parsec Productions, the original developer of the hit indie horror Slender the Eight Pages. So I figure what better time to go back and run through some creepy dark woods while being chased by an interdimensional being, and to do that properly I feel we must go back to the original 8 pages. Just for some quick clarification before I continue on, I wrote and recorded this video before I was even aware of the announcement that Slender the Arrival is being remastered, or remade, as it seems to be the case given the new clip that they've shown and a countdown on the website. So I guess I'll be doing a follow-up video soon. For some initial context in case you're somehow completely unfamiliar with the Slenderman mythos, he originated on the Something Awful forum back in 2009, appearing in a series of photoshopped photos as a tall, faceless entity in the background of photos of alleged victims who'd disappeared under mysterious circumstances. An interesting aspect of the Slender creepypasta is that there isn't an official canon backstory, and every story featuring Slender has its own interpretations of what he is and how he behaves.
Because it's faceless, because it's quiet, because it doesn't speak words, is open to a lot of interpretation, and open to a lot of possibilities, a lot of projection. It varies from person to person as to what Slender Man actually is.
One of the most popular Slender properties was Marble Hornets on YouTube, a found footage style horror series that starts off as a simple investigation into what happened during the filming of an unfinished student film that becomes a much darker mystery, as it turns out that an entity known as the Operator has been abducting and brainwashing people into his minions known as proxies.
Why would I pay you for what you're giving me? I mean, really?
Oh, that's real nice.
Who else is gonna work with you with this attitude?
However, it almost can't be argued that Slender really exploded in popularity in June 2012, when Mark Hadley released the freeware horror game Slender, and more specifically after PewDiePie uploaded a Let's Play reaction of the game. I mean, this game really took off, and everyone was playing it in droves.
What are we going to do once we've got 8 pages? We're going to read it? Maybe it's a flip book.
Yeah, maybe it draws a picture of me shooting you in the head.
Kind of weird if that's what it was. Glad I spent the whole night in the woods for that.
The release of Slender the Eight Pages, as it eventually became known as, came at a point in time for the horror genre where a change was starting to happen. Part of this was due to the success of Amnesia: The Dark Descent, but also because of a growing fatigue in the state of AAA horror games that had been taking the wrong lessons from the success of Resident Evil 4 and becoming increasingly more action and set-piece focused, with protagonists that were a lot more empowered, and if I were to use Resident Evil 6 as an example, since that also came out in 2012, Leon and the other protagonists in that game were essentially superheroes.
Back for more?
Slender was the exact opposite of a spectacle game, and actually extremely simple from a design standpoint. Running on the Unity engine, which was the ubiquitous engine of the time, Slender sees you lost in a dark, misty forest in the middle of the night, armed only with a flashlight.
I'll man the flashlight.
You only have one goal, and that is to find 8 pages hidden around the map at various landmarks scattered throughout the forest, all while the eponymous Slender Man stalks you throughout the forest, appearing between the trees in the distance and teleporting around to try and catch you. It was remarkable how genuinely frightening the game was when it was released, as it almost perfectly preyed on players' primal fears of being lost and isolated, with the fog limiting your visibility, making it incredibly easy to get lost, as well as the subtle but chilling atmospheric music pulse that accompanies the experience, which escalates in intensity as you collect more pages and Slender's appearances start becoming more frequent.
So if we stand still, is he
You have
gonna...
to run away! You're like, oh, there he is!
What?
Stand still!
Why are you telling me to run? I'm just holding the torch!
You have
got
to
the legs!
look in the direction to run away, Gavin. I can't run away when you're staring at him, fucking asking him out for brunch.
Eventually, the game would become easier, as it was a fixed map and the landmarks where the pages could spawn were in the same place every time, meaning you could plot out a route to hit the outer map areas first in a circle, and then hit the middle map areas. But this still didn't detract from the overall scare factor of Slender, or its popularity. I can actually remember going to quite a few parties at the time where someone would decide it would be a great idea to boot up Slender and have everyone brave enough to take turns trying to beat it. The popularity and massive success of Slender the Eight Pages helped create a shift in focus for the horror genre in video games, particularly the indie scene, where things moved away from action and leaned more into the hide-and-seek style of gameplay, which would later catch on in the AAA scene with titles like Alien Isolation. Of course, as it usually goes with anything that is unique and successful, it seldom ever stays unique for very long, and over the next few months, yes, months, many other Slender-related games started popping up on the internet. What started with Slender the 8 Pages gave way to the likes of Slender the 9 Pages, Slender Mansion, Slender Prison, Slender Elementary, Slender Tubbies, Slender the Remake, all riffing on the exact same gameplay style, and each with a growing sense of diminishing returns as the maps got bigger and more convoluted, making them more annoying than scary. Although I must admit Slender Mansion was pretty creepy, if not just for channeling some Amnesia vibes. I don't know, old mansions are just creepy, right Resident Evil Remake?
A second late, you would have fit nicely into a sandwich.
Really?
A couple of games did try to break from the formula a bit, one of which was Haunted Memories, a game that I remember being kind of popular, but I found it kind of dull and the graphics just looked awful. Like someone just put bloom, motion blur and depth of field on maximum with no consideration for overall image quality. Really? I can't jump over this gate? Really?
Really?
The other game that I actually quite enjoyed was Slender's Woods, which was made using eDuke 32, a source port for Duke Nukem 3D. Slender's Woods was similar to Haunted Memories in the sense that it moved away from collecting pages and had you trapped in a forest at night, completing objectives at different locations, only Slender's Woods did it a lot better. This was a spooky little game with a great atmosphere, and it wasn't too confusing, although the ending genuinely sucked. Like, why would you make the player hunt Slender with a gun? That's fucking stupid.
Oh, I'm not carrying that.
While all of this was going on, in the background, Mark Hadley of Parsec Productions, the original developer of Slender the 8 Pages, teamed up with developer and publisher Blue Isle Studios and began working on a full-blown sequel, titled Slender the Arrival. Hype quickly began to grow in December 2012 as the game was announced, with a series of screenshots showing off an incredibly higher detail of graphical fidelity over the original, but also due to the fact that the developers were teaming up with the writers of Marble Hornets to help the game's story, implying that the game was going to be a much richer experience than the 8 Pages. A pre-order demo released in February 2013, which was for all intents and purposes a high-fidelity remake of the 8 Pages, and then the final game launched just over a month later. Now, I can remember playing The Arrival back when this first version launched, and the reception to the game was somewhat mixed. There was a lot to love about it, from the impressive scenic visuals that were impressive for a Unity engine game, the hauntingly atmospheric soundtrack, and there were some great scares across the campaign. But it was kind of disappointing for how short it was, combined with some frustrating gameplay sequences, one in particular I'll talk about later, and with a story that felt anticlimactic and a little bit unfinished. There was a great sense of mystery in the game's backstory through the collectible notes that you'd find, but there just wasn't enough answers in order to make the story feel cohesive and comprehensible.
Dude, real or not, thousands of people have posted sightings. It's like Thin Man is the new Bigfoot or something.
Or Thin Man is just a ghost with a brand name.
I definitely still liked the game for what it was, and in a lot of ways it was still a cut above a lot of the other Slender games. But that's not where the story would end for Slender the Arrival, as in October 2013 the game was released on Steam, along with an updated prologue and a new ending, which would be the first substantial update, followed by another update featuring an additional 2 new levels when the game was ported to consoles in 2014. And this version of Slender the Arrival is the one that I love, and the version I wish we had got in the first place, as it feels so much more cohesive as a story-driven experience, and it's a lot longer, making it feel a lot more rewarding to play through. For this video, I played through the game on the PlayStation 4 version, both for ease of capturing footage, and because there doesn't seem to be any noticeable difference in the graphics between it and the PC version, unlike the PS3 and mobile versions. So in Slender the Arrival, you play as a young girl called Lauren, who has travelled out to the countryside to help her best friend Kate move house after the death of her mother. Upon arriving at her house just as the sun is setting, you find it seemingly abandoned and dishevelled, with cryptic drawings hinting at the presence of Slender, along with a couple of notes from someone called CR who has been communicating with Kate about her mental health and unexplained events that have happened. One thing that was fixed in the updated versions of the game was the interactions with doors that was really finicky in the original release, as they were trying to emulate the pull mechanic from Amnesia, but it just didn't work properly. Now in the update, you just simply interact with the door and they open and close automatically. You head up to Kate's room after finding the torch and keys, along with probably seeing Slender through the window briefly at some point while exploring. Inside Kate's room are the pages from the original game sprayed across her walls, and a broken window where you then hear a blood-curdling scream from outside, which of course prompts you to go and investigate.
What are we doing?
We're hunting a ghost.
A ghost, exactly. Who does that?
At this point in the original release, you would walk through the gate and the level would then end, whereas here in the update, you now have to make a long trek through the hills to the park, where Slender can sometimes be spotted in the far distance watching you. Throughout this first level, you can also find a few posters about a missing boy named Charlie Matheson, something that wasn't really explained well in the original. Near the end of this hike through the misty hills, you come across the burned remnants of an old house, which is an area that still genuinely makes me feel uneasy going into. You'll hear a whimper if you choose to go inside and find an emaciated, golem-like figure standing in the corner that you don't have to approach, but this is what happens when you do. You then reach the Oakside Park, with a large message, presumably from Kate, asking you to find her. And this level, like I said, is essentially an updated remake of the original 8 Pages game, that sees you running around the park looking for pages scattered across disparate landmarks while Slender sporadically teleports to try and catch you. However, there are some fundamental changes added to it to make it a bit more challenging, especially on retries should you fail. Unlike in the original 8 Pages, where the landmarks were in fixed locations, Slender the Arrival incorporates a randomizer not just for the pages, but the landmarks themselves, as they shift around the map each time you replay. This means you can't rely on memory as much as you could in the original 8 Pages, since you could head to where a landmark was on your last run only to find that this time there's nothing there. You also start the level in a different spot every time you play, in a further attempt to try and disorientate you and cloud your sense of geographic memory. It's a really simple but effective way of retaining the tension in the level, since it's pretty unlikely you'll manage to beat it on your first attempt. It's also a lot more creepy than the original 8 Pages, now that the landmarks are a lot more natural looking structures that you find out in the park. like an information center or a radio tower or someone's campsite, rather than a random hay silo or a big tunnel that goes nowhere, or this random wall thing.
It looks like a formation of sticks in the shape of a pile. Could have been left here for us by Thin Man.
Slender himself also looks a lot more menacing and more detailed in The Arrival. He's a lot taller now, and you can even see indents on his face where normal facial features should be, which is actually quite creepy. He even has some animations this time around too, like bending down towards you, reaching out to grab you, and even a walking animation. Although most of the time you likely won't get to see these properly during normal gameplay, since your reaction upon seeing him every time he pops up is to turn around and start running in the opposite direction. If you turn on the God mode cheat, however, it is possible to get a much better look at him up close and see a few of his animations. Although I was never quite sure how to trigger his walking animation, as all I was ever able to get him to do was slide towards me. Once you finally beat this level, Lauren seemingly escapes from Slender and wakes up the next morning even deeper in the forest, and this opening area is quite visually striking. While the game is somewhat lacking in terms of texture quality and geometric complexity with its environments, what remains impressive is the sheer scale of vistas and the gorgeous lighting work being pulled off in the engine, with some nicely simulated God rays. The endless views of forest and mountains surrounding you really does a lot to reinforce the game's oppressive atmosphere and the sense of complete isolation Lauren has found herself in. You wander through this scenic clearing and find yourself outside an incredibly welcoming looking entrance to an abandoned mine.
I'm not going in there.
According to reports, workers had heard crying noises within, but search parties had never located a source, which may or may not have led to the mine being closed and abandoned. And this level right here is the one that caused players the most grief and frustration when the game first launched, particularly Markiplier.
Get away from me! God, no! You're not getting me! No! No!
The objective of this level is fairly simple and is essentially another collectible mechanic like the 8 Pages, where you have to find and activate 6 generators randomly scattered throughout this large double-storied and maze-like mine. And on hardcore difficulty, you also have to find gas for the generators too, doubling the amount of things you need to collect. Slender does appear in this level, but he's a lot less prominent than he is in the 8 Pages. In fact, sometimes you can beat this level without even seeing him. Your primary antagonist in this level is the Chaser, a masked and hooded figure who will chase you relentlessly throughout this level and attack you if they catch you. This is where the Marble Hornet's influence in the story was the most apparent in the original version, as the Chaser bore a resemblance to Masky from Marble Hornets, who was one of Slender's proxies in that series. Now, what made this level the source of so much frustration in the original release was the fact that there didn't seem to be any way of fending off or avoiding the attacks from the Chaser, and generally you can only survive 2 attacks before you're killed. So combine this with the random placement of the generators throughout this incredibly large and confusing level layout, with lots of small rooms that you have to check, it got pretty annoying fast, especially since you would usually get to about 5 generators before you died, or even if you found all 6, you still had to make your way back to the elevator without dying.
And that is exactly why our lives suck.
Unfortunately, a lot of the frustration in this level was at the fault of the developers, because they did not make it clear there was actually a mechanic for stunning the Chaser with your flashlight. By pressing the right mouse button, you could create a focused beam, somehow, which stops the Chaser in its tracks and gives you a short sprint boost to put some distance between you and it. This mechanic was properly tutorialized in the game's first update, since so many players complained about this particular level, and once you're aware that this is actually what you're supposed to do, the level really isn't that bad or as challenging as it was initially.
Begone, spawn of Satan! She's scared of the light! Oh, what you gonna do, huh? Oh, you scared of a little light, huh?
It is still the one level of this game that just gives me that sinking feeling of dread every time I have to play it again, and there's probably some unresolved trauma from the amount of times I died trying to beat this level on hardcore too.
So you're saying that this crap is actually crap?
The next level is another scenic vista as Lauren has a new objective to make her way out to the radio tower that you can see looming far off in the distance, which for some reason always seems to make me think of Forbidden Siren 2. In this final build of the game, this level actually serves as a hub of sorts for the two new levels added to the game when it was released for consoles. The first being a flashback that is triggered when you find this old haggard teddy bear. In this flashback, you play as the missing child Charlie Matheson, whose missing poster has been seen throughout the game, and you get to see how Slender lured him away from his parents, and this is a pretty unsettling sequence with how Charlie starts crying and you being able to hear his parents calling out for him in panic. But watch this, I'm about to completely ruin this scene for you forever.
Charlie!
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 Charlie! Charlie! Charlie! Charlie!
I'm right here. What do you want?
We're on a bridge, Charlie!
The other new level added is actually a pretty substantial addition to the overall story for Slender the Arrival, and as I alluded to earlier, helps make everything feel more cohesive and complete. In this level, you play through found footage on a videotape as Carl Ross, or CR, who was a rather vague minor character in the original release, as Kate's friend who had also been suffering from hallucinations from Slenderman. CR had been investigating the phenomena surrounding Slender and learned that a child had gone missing under mysterious circumstances, and that later the father took his own life. CR then decides to go and investigate the Matheson homestead, which is, like every location in this game, seemingly abandoned. While exploring the property, CR discovers that the Matheson family are actually the ones who inadvertently summoned Slender to this land, and that he's been haunting the family for several years.
Am I on it?
It's in this level that you discover the identity of the emaciated figure from the house in the first level is none other than Charlie, who is sadly now a ghoulish proxy for Slender, and there are a number of great scares that this level generates using him, as he chases you across various parts of this map, like through the fields and in a tense escape sequence through the decrepit Matheson house. Easily the most terrifying area to play through is the cellar area in the field, where you have to find some gas for a generator, and the lights in here constantly flicker on and off. Combined with the tight corridors, it creates a scary sense of claustrophobia. And throughout, Charlie is taunting you, sprinting past doorways and appearing momentarily at the end of hallways before disappearing with the flickering lights. It's actually a pretty well constructed piece of horror, with a great sense of atmosphere and building tension as the day slowly turns to night across the level. The next level is also another flashback, which is incredibly brief and sees you playing as Kate on the night Slender came to abduct her, with the simple objective of trying to close all of the windows and doors throughout the house before Slender gets inside. But I mean, come on Kate, it's kind of your own fault Slender caught you if you're just leaving the front door wide open on a stormy night when a Lovecraftian interdimensional entity is haunting you.
No, it'll be that easy. Why won't it be that easy?
Lauren then continues up the mountain to try and reach the radio tower, where CR's cryptic notes and messages seem to be implying there is a way to stop Slender there. However, unfortunately, when you finally reach the tower, upon reading the many messages etched upon the walls inside, it becomes apparent that Kate has gone insane, as you find the burned corpse of CR inside, who had likely figured the only way to truly escape from Slender was death, and Lauren realizes that Kate is probably going to kill her. And this unfortunately is where the original game ended rather abruptly, and quite disappointingly. Even more so if you then went ahead and played through the game again on hardcore mode, as the additional scene it rewarded just added more confusion to the ending.
Wait. Oh, come on!
Thankfully, the initial Steam update and the final console releases address this issue by adding a brand new extended ending, where Charlie rushes at Lauren inside the tower, and she then awakens in the basement of the burned house from the extended prologue. After reading one last note from CR, Charlie mysteriously disappears again, and Lauren makes one last attempt to try and escape this nightmare she's found herself in. While trying to escape the house, you discover Kate crying in a corner, and upon approaching her, she attacks, revealing that she was the chaser in the mine, and is now another proxy for Slender, who then seemingly kills Lauren as the last thing you see through the camcorder is Lawrence Thiep being dragged off screen. A chilling but ultimately a much better ending for the game and the story as a whole.
Is that new dirt? No, it's not new dirt. There's leaves there now, it's autumn.
There are actually 2 more levels you can play once you've beaten the main story. One of them is known as The Glitch, or Haunted, which is a very Kojima feeling sequence in the nature of how you access it. You have to interact with the missing poster of Charlie 3 times in the prologue, where you'll then take him to a different main menu where your campaign progress seemingly vanishes, and you then play through a couple of hide and seek levels at Kate's house, with a bunch of deliberate texture glitches that are used alongside the screen flickering, and ending with an ominous new menu with the option of please end this. It's very Kojima. The other level that you can play after the story was added in version 1.3 called Genesis, and this is a 100% exact remake of the original Slender the Eight Pages, running in this updated Slender engine on Unity, which is pretty damn cool. It is admittedly a little bit easier than the original since it's not quite as dark, and the draw distance is a lot further, meaning you can see the landmarks a lot easier from afar now, which in turn makes it less difficult to get lost. But upon beating this level, Slender will catch you as he always does, where you then learn that Kate was actually the girl you played as in the original game, linking the two together, hence the name Genesis.
That was scary.
So what then happened with Slender after the release of Slender the Arrival? Well, as I mentioned earlier in the video, Slender's popularity kind of exploded in 2012, but with the diminished returns nature of all the copycat games that followed to try and capitalize on its popularity, after a while, Slender started to just kind of become more annoying than he did interesting, or even scary. Of course, there was also the infamous Slender-related stabbing case in 2015, but for the sake of brevity, I'm not going to get into that. And then finally, in 2018, Hollywood officially hammered the final nail into Slender's proverbial coffin, with the admittedly hilarious but awful film adaptation. In a weird way, and this could easily just be my opinion, it sort of seems like the fascination and excitement surrounding the character of Slender Man kind of peaked with Slender the Arrival, as it was a culmination of a bunch of different parts that had appealed people to him on the forums and through the games, before the internet kind of just moved on to the next horror sensation, Five Nights at Freddy's, which has somehow remained popular to this day, and that kind of baffles me if I'm honest. Anyway, I hope you've all enjoyed my piece on Slender the Arrival, and maybe it was also a trip down memory lane for you as much as it was for me, as I had to replay a number of the old Slender games for this video. As always, if you liked this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and you can also support the channel further on Patreon. Until next time, stay safe out there everyone, maybe try to avoid wandering around parks late at night, and I'll see you all in the next video. Huh, would you look at that, I managed to make the script 8 pages long.
Alright. That was such a